You won't believe what happened when a black cashier was humiliated in front of a store full of customers by a racist man who thought he could get away with anything. But what no one expected was who walked in next. And by the time the truth came out, that same man would be begging for mercy. Stick around, because this story will not only make your blood boil, it'll also leave you clapping when karma comes around in the most unexpected, satisfying way. By the end of this story, you'll understand the power of dignity, the danger of assumptions, and why you should never judge someone based on the color of their skin. It all started on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in a small, bustling town in Georgia. The air was thick with humidity, and the streets were wet from a storm that had passed just an hour before. Inside a popular family-owned grocery store named Brookfield Market, 19-year-old Malik Johnson was behind the register with a soft smile and steady hands. He'd only been working at the store for a few months, but his work ethic, politeness, and calm demeanor had already made him a favorite among the regulars. Malik had dreams. Big ones. He was saving every penny from his part-time job to help his mother pay bills while also putting himself through college. His goal? To become a pediatric nurse. He knew the odds were stacked against him. Born and raised in a rough part of town, he'd seen friends fall victim to violence, drop out of school, or get caught up in the system. But not Malik. He had promised his late grandmother he would make something of himself. That promise kept him grounded. That promise kept him focused. But not everyone saw Malik's heart. Not everyone cared about his dreams. And one man in particular made it clear that Malik's skin color was all he needed to see. Around 3:45 p.m., as the store's energy slowed into a quiet hum, a tall, middle-aged white man with slicked-back gray hair walked in. He wore a pressed button-down shirt and expensive shoes, and he looked around the store like he owned it. His name was Gregory "Greg" Thompson, a wealthy real estate developer known for his temper and entitlement. Greg was the kind of man who believed rules didn't apply to him. And that day he was in a mood. As Greg approached the checkout line with a cart full of overpriced wine and imported cheese, Malik smiled and said, "Good afternoon, sir. Did you find everything you needed?" Greg didn't respond. He just stared at Malik like he was dirt under his shoe. "Do you even work here?" Greg said slowly, his voice laced with disdain. "Or are you just standing there trying to look useful?" Malik, stunned, maintained his composure. "Yes, sir, I work here. I'd be happy to ring you up." Greg rolled his eyes and dropped his items on the counter with a loud thud. "I'll bet they hired you to fill a quota, huh? Diversity hire? Figures." A few nearby customers stopped what they were doing. One mother pulled her toddler closer. An elderly man looked up from his grocery list. Malik's hands trembled slightly, but he refused to let the man break him. "Sir," he said, voice calm but firm, "I'm here to help you. But I won't tolerate disrespect." That only made Greg louder. "Oh, you won't tolerate disrespect?" he sneered. "You think you're somebody? You're just a cashier. A minimum wage nobody. You'll be bagging groceries for the rest of your life while people like me run the world." Malik's face flushed, not from shame, but from the effort it took to not react. Greg wasn't just being rude. He was trying to humiliate him. Trying to make him crack. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, Greg did the unthinkable. He leaned in close and spat on the floor right near Malik's shoes. "Clean that up, boy," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. The store fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The air was electric with tension. Malik blinked. Swallowed hard. He looked at the spit, then looked back at Greg. His fists clenched under the counter. And then, the bell above the door jingled. A tall, sharply dressed black man in his late 30s walked in. His presence was commanding. Confident. He carried himself like someone who didn't just walk into a room. He owned it. That man was Jordan Blake, the new owner of Brookfield Market. But Greg had no idea who he was. Jordan had bought the store just 2 weeks earlier, after moving back to his hometown following years of success as a business consultant in New York. He believed in investing in his community and had quietly taken over ownership from the retiring previous owner without much fanfare. Jordan was there that day to check in on operations and introduce himself to the staff. What he walked into was something else entirely. He stopped just a few feet away, his eyes locking on the scene before him. Malik standing frozen, jaw tight, and Greg towering over him with smug satisfaction. "Is there a problem here?" Jordan asked, voice calm but firm. Greg didn't even look at him. Yeah, the problem is your employee here has an attitude. You need to train these people better. Jordan raised an eyebrow. These people? Greg turned, clearly irritated. Yeah, him. This so-called cashier who thinks he can talk back to paying customers. Jordan folded his arms. He asked you not to disrespect him. That's not talking back. That's self-respect. Greg scoffed. Oh great. Another one. Let me guess, you're gonna lecture me about how I'm the problem. Is that it? Jordan took a slow step forward. No. I'm going to tell you to leave my store. Greg's head snapped up. Your store? Jordan nodded. Yes. I own this establishment. And I don't tolerate racism, harassment, or abuse of any kind. Greg let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You think you can just kick me out? I know people. I could buy this place 10 times over. Then buy your own store, Jordan said coolly. But this one? You're not welcome here. The customers who had gathered nearby began whispering, their eyes wide. Greg's face turned red. This is outrageous. I'll ruin you. Try me, Jordan said, pulling out his phone. Because this whole thing? It's on security footage. And unless you want to explain your behavior to every news outlet in the state, I suggest you walk out. Now. Greg looked around, suddenly aware of the phones pointed in his direction. He realized for the first time that the crowd was against him, that he was losing control. He muttered something under his breath, turned on his heel, and stormed out. The bell jingled behind him. And just like that he was gone. Jordan turned to Malik. You all right? Malik nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. Jordan put a hand on his shoulder. You handled that better than most grown men would have. I'm proud of you. Customers clapped. Someone shouted, about time. But the story doesn't end there. Because what no one knew, not even Malik, was that Greg wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That night, as Jordan closed up the store, a sleek black car pulled into the lot. Greg stepped out, his expression dark. But this time, he wasn't alone. He brought backup. And not just any backup. He brought the bank manager who financed Brookfield Market's recent renovation. The same bank manager who happened to be a personal friend of Greg's. We need to talk, Greg said with a smug grin, flashing a stack of documents. Jordan's eyes narrowed. I said you weren't welcome here. Greg smirked. Oh, I'm not here to shop. I'm here to collect. See, I made a few calls. And it turns out your loan has a little clause. A clause you overlooked. One that lets the bank call it in early if certain terms aren't met. Jordan's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? You'll find out soon enough, Greg said, turning to leave. Let's see how long you can keep that store once your funding disappears. And with that, Greg drove off into the night, his plan already in motion. Jordan stood there, heart racing, staring at the man who had insulted his employee, tried to humiliate him, and now was coming for his entire livelihood. Malik had faced racism that day. Jordan had stood up for justice. But Greg? Greg wasn't finished. And what he was about to do next could destroy everything. Or so he thought. That night, Greg came back, and he didn't come alone. With him was a high-powered bank manager, one of Greg's old college buddies, who happened to control the loan that Jordan had just used to renovate the store. Greg had done some digging and found a sneaky little clause buried in the loan agreement, a clause that allowed the bank to call in the full amount early under reputational concerns. It was vague. It was questionable. But it was legal. And Greg was ready to use it like a loaded weapon. This is what happens, Greg said with a smug grin, when people like you forget their place. Jordan was stunned. But he didn't show it. He nodded slowly, holding Greg's gaze, then simply said, We'll see about that. Greg laughed and got back in his car. He thought he had won. He thought it was over. But what he didn't know was that Jordan wasn't just a businessman. He was a strategist, a fighter. And he didn't rise from a broken home to become a millionaire just to let someone like Greg knock him down. The very next morning, Jordan got to work. He called Malik in early. They sat down in the back office and Jordan explained everything. The racist customer, the loan clause, the bank's sudden pressure. Malik listened quietly. So what do we do now? He asked. Jordan looked him in the eye. We fight smart. And that's exactly what they did. First, Jordan contacted his legal team. Then he made another call, to a woman named Danielle Rivers, a no-nonsense investigative reporter known for taking down corrupt business leaders and exposing racial injustice. Jordan had done a favor for Danielle years ago during his time in New York, and now it was time to call that favor in. "I've got a story for you," he told her. "But you'll need to move fast." Danielle listened, and her ears perked up at every detail. The racist confrontation, the abuse of banking power, and Greg's clear attempt to ruin a black-owned business out of spite. "Send me the footage," she said. "I'll be there in 4 hours." By that afternoon, Danielle was at the store with her camera crew. She interviewed Malik. She reviewed the security footage. She even went outside and spoke to a few regular customers who had witnessed the incident. One of them, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Franklin, wiped a tear from her cheek as she told the camera, "I've never seen a young man handle himself with so much grace. That man was evil. But Malik? He stood tall." That same night, the story aired on a major local network. The headline read, "Racist Executive Threatens Black-Owned Business After Humiliating Teen Cashier." The footage was undeniable. The spitting. The insults. The veiled threat about knowing people at the bank. It all went viral. Within 48 hours, the internet had exploded. Hashtags like #Justice for Malik and #Boycott Greg Thompson were trending. Malik's name was on everyone's lips. Celebrities tweeted their support. Local activists held a rally outside Brookfield Market with signs that read, "We stand with Malik," and "Black Business Matters." But the real twist? It came when Jordan got a surprise phone call from the corporate office of the bank itself. Not the manager Greg brought, but from the CEO. "Mr. Blake," the man said, "we'd like to personally apologize. We had no idea one of our managers was involved in anything like this. Rest assured, that individual is being placed on immediate leave pending investigation. Your loan is safe. We will not be calling in any amount." Jordan breathed a sigh of relief. Greg's plan had failed. Public pressure worked. But Greg still hadn't learned his lesson. No, in fact, when he saw the backlash, he doubled down. He called into a local radio show and said Malik was playing the race card, and that he barely remembers the incident. He even claimed the video was edited to make him look bad. That was the final straw. Danielle called Jordan the next day. "I think it's time to go deeper," she said. "I did some digging. You won't believe what I found." What she found would flip everything upside down. It turns out Greg wasn't just a rich customer with a nasty attitude. He had a record. Not a criminal one, but a trail of civil complaints, HR incidents, and settlements for workplace discrimination stretching back over 10 years. A former assistant sued him for verbal abuse. A black intern at one of his real estate firms said he made racially charged comments, and was fired after reporting it. Every single case had been settled quietly behind closed doors. No one ever pressed charges. No one ever went public. Until now. Danielle published a follow-up article titled, "Pattern of Prejudice: Greg Thompson's Decade of Discrimination." It was damning. The internet exploded again. Greg's name became poison. Real estate partners started backing out of deals. Investors froze accounts. But the biggest blow came when the city got involved. A councilwoman who had seen the viral footage reached out to Jordan and asked if he would speak at a town hall event focused on racism in local commerce. Jordan agreed, but he insisted Malik be the one to speak. That night, in front of a packed crowd and live-streamed to thousands online, Malik stood at the podium in a borrowed suit and trembling hands. He cleared his throat and said, "A man tried to break me last week. He tried to make me feel small because of how I look. But what he didn't know was that I have something he'll never understand. Dignity. I didn't let him turn me into what he wanted to see. And because I stood tall, because I had people like Mr. Blake and all of you behind me, I'm still standing. And I'm not going anywhere." The crowd roared. Jordan stepped forward and wrapped an arm around him. That single moment was picked up by news stations across the country. But Greg? Greg was losing everything. His company was hemorrhaging clients. One of his biggest commercial projects was shut down when the city pulled permits. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Because someone else had been watching this whole time. Someone with a lot of money. Someone with a long memory. And that someone was Jordan's father-in-law. You see, what no one knew was that Jordan had married into one of the wealthiest families in the South. His wife's father, Arthur Lane, was a retired judge turned private investor who quietly owned millions in commercial real estate, including properties that Greg's company leased. Arthur hadn't stepped in before because he believed in letting his son-in-law fight his own battles. But now it was personal. Arthur made a few calls. And within days, Greg's company received notice that 2 of its major office leases, worth millions, would not be renewed. Greg panicked. He tried to call Arthur. Tried to negotiate. But Arthur never picked up the phone. Instead, he had his lawyer send a 2-sentence letter. "We don't do business with racists. Consider your ties with Lane Holdings officially severed." Greg was finished. His business collapsing, reputation destroyed, and power stripped from him piece by piece. The man who had walked into that grocery store thinking he was untouchable had become a pariah. Malik, meanwhile, had started a scholarship fund with the donations pouring in from around the country. He called it the Stand Tall Initiative, aimed at helping young black students in underserved communities pursue higher education and leadership training. Jordan offered him a full-time position helping manage store operations while he finished his nursing degree. Danielle won an award for her reporting. And Brookfield Market? It became a symbol of resistance, of resilience, of rising above hate. But just when it seemed like everything had been settled, something unexpected happened. Late one night, Jordan received an envelope. No return address. Just a single piece of paper inside. And when he unfolded it, his heart stopped. It was a legal document. A subpoena. A lawsuit. Filed by Greg Thompson. The grounds? Defamation. Emotional distress. Loss of business due to malicious misrepresentation. Jordan couldn't believe it. Even after everything, Greg still thought he could twist the system in his favor. Still thought he could sue his way back to power. Still thought he could silence the truth. And worst of all, he had found a lawyer willing to take the case. A lawyer with a reputation for winning dirty cases through loopholes, aggressive tactics, and courtroom theatrics. Greg was down, but not out. Not yet. And he was about to drag Jordan, Malik, Danielle, and everyone involved into a brutal legal war. One that could cost them everything. But what Greg didn't know was that someone else was watching. Someone with information. Someone who had worked closely with Greg in the past. Someone who held the key to exposing his biggest secret yet. Greg filed a multi-million-dollar defamation suit against Jordan, Malik, Danielle, and even the local news station, claiming he was the victim of a targeted smear campaign. The legal system, he believed, was still on his side. And he had hired one of the most vicious trial lawyers in the country, Henry Callister, a man known for exploiting technicalities and twisting narratives. Greg wasn't fighting for justice. He was fighting for revenge. When Jordan received the subpoena, it shook him. He knew Greg was dangerous. But this was warfare. Danielle was furious. "He's trying to punish us for telling the truth," she said, "and if we don't fight back, it'll send a message to every racist out there that they can bully their way out of accountability." Malik, now managing operations at the store and preparing to enter nursing school, felt torn. "I just wanted to do my job," he said quietly. "I didn't ask for any of this." But Jordan put a hand on his shoulder. "No, you didn't. But that's why we have to fight. Not just for us, for everyone watching." The legal battle began. Depositions. Motions. Courtroom hearings. Greg's legal team tried to paint Malik as a liar, claiming the video had been edited for shock value and public manipulation. They suggested Danielle had a vendetta and that Jordan had used the incident to boost his store's publicity. It was an ugly, drawn-out process. Local opinion remained strong behind Malik and Jordan, but inside the courtroom, the tide was uncertain. Greg's team had filed a motion to suppress key video footage, claiming it violated Greg's privacy because it was recorded without proper consent, despite it being public security footage in a commercial establishment. The judge, an older white man with a conservative track record, agreed to hear the argument. For the first time since the nightmare began, Jordan felt his confidence waver. "If we lose that footage," Danielle said, "we lose the whole foundation of the case." But just as things reached their lowest point, a new player entered the scene. Her name was Cynthia Lane, and she wasn't just anybody. She was Greg's former personal assistant of 7 years. And she had seen everything. Cynthia contacted Danielle in secret. "I don't want money," she said. "I want to make this right. I should have spoken up years ago." Cynthia revealed that she had quietly kept digital backups of emails, internal memos, and voice recordings, proof of Greg's pattern of racism, harassment, and even worse. She had been silenced once with a severance package and an NDA, but seeing Malik's face on TV, seeing another young black person suffer, pushed her to the edge. "I'm done protecting a monster," she said. Cynthia handed over a thumb drive. What was on it was explosive. Among the files was an audio recording of Greg boasting about manipulating the legal system to crush anyone who crossed him, including that little black punk who thinks he can talk back to me. But even more shocking was an email chain showing that Greg had pressured the bank manager, his college buddy, to call in Jordan's loan. It was proof of malicious intent. Proof that Greg had orchestrated everything. Danielle, stunned, turned to Jordan. "This is the smoking gun." They rushed the evidence to their legal team. Their attorneys immediately filed a counter-motion to introduce the new materials. Greg's team tried to block it. But when the judge reviewed the email and audio files, his entire demeanor changed. He looked directly at Greg and said, "Mr. Thompson, if what I'm seeing here is legitimate, and so far it appears to be, you're not just guilty of filing a frivolous lawsuit. You may be facing criminal exposure." The courtroom went silent. Greg's attorney asked for a recess. Jordan and Malik sat quietly. Danielle squeezed Cynthia's hand. "You just changed everything," she whispered. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Supporters holding signs. Media vans. Chants of justice for Malik filled the air. News of Cynthia's whistleblowing hit social media like wildfire. The momentum had shifted. But the fight wasn't over. Greg, desperate, called a press conference. He claimed the recordings were doctored. That Cynthia had an emotional vendetta. That Jordan had hacked private communications. It was nonsense, but it revealed one important truth. Greg was unraveling. Then came the real twist. A young man named Terrence Mitchell stepped forward. He was Greg's nephew. Estranged from the family. Quiet. Kept out of the spotlight. But he had something to say. Terrence contacted Danielle and asked for an interview. In it, he revealed that as a teenager he had experienced Greg's racism firsthand. "He told me not to bring my black friends to the country club," Terrence said, holding back tears. Said it was bad for his image. But Terrence dropped one more bombshell. "When I was 16, he said, Greg used a fake name to buy into a company that was hit with a racial discrimination lawsuit. He settled it and had the whole thing buried. But the records still exist, under that alias." Danielle's team launched a private investigation. What they found was shocking. Greg had created a shell company under the name Douglas Keene, and used it to funnel money into controversial land acquisitions in minority neighborhoods, pushing out tenants, inflating rent, and gentrifying entire blocks. The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Jordan's legal team amended their countersuit. It was no longer just about defamation. It was now about intentional malice, racial discrimination, and fraud. Greg, cornered, began missing court dates. His lawyer withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences. Rumors swirled that Greg was selling off assets, preparing to flee. But Jordan wasn't letting go. "He's not walking away from this," he said. "He has to answer for what he's done. Not just to me. Not just to Malik. But to everyone he stepped on for years." The judge agreed to fast-track the case for trial. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, activists, curious citizens, all waiting to see how it would end. Malik, now confident and composed, sat beside Jordan and Danielle at the plaintiff's table. Cynthia and Terrence were scheduled to testify. It was all lining up. But just minutes before opening arguments began, a court officer walked into the judge's chambers. Then another. Whispers spread like wildfire. Something was wrong. The judge called a private meeting with the attorneys. Jordan and Malik waited in tense silence. 5 minutes. 10. Finally their lawyer came back out. His face was pale. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Greg's gone." "Gone?" Jordan asked. "What do you mean gone?" The lawyer looked stunned. "He left the country. Slipped through customs using a second passport. Took a private plane out of a regional airport. The authorities didn't even realize it until this morning." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled. The judge called for immediate adjournment. Danielle sat in disbelief. "He ran," she whispered. "He actually ran." But then, Jordan's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. A voicemail came through. He played it. A distorted voice. "You thought you won," the voice said, "but this isn't over. I'm not done. You people always think the world's on your side. We'll see how long that lasts." The line cut. Malik turned to Jordan, his face tightening. That was him. Jordan's jaw clenched. Yeah. And he just made a mistake. When Greg disappeared, the FBI launched an investigation. Danielle handed over every file Cynthia, Greg's former assistant, had provided. Terrence, Greg's own nephew, supplied travel documents, financial records, and phone logs. But it wasn't enough to track him. Not yet. That's when Jordan made a call, to someone few people knew he had a connection to. Years ago, Jordan had helped fund a criminal justice reform program, where he met a private investigator named Rafael Cruz. Rafael wasn't just good, he was legendary. He'd tracked fugitives through 3 continents and once exposed an entire fraud ring operating out of Dubai. When Jordan explained what happened, Rafael didn't hesitate. "Send me everything," he said. "Give me 3 days." 3 days turned into 5. 5 turned into 10. No word. Then, just as everyone started to lose hope, Jordan got a message. One encrypted file. No text. No warning. Just a video. He opened it. And what he saw sent chills down his spine. It was Greg, standing in a lavish estate on the coast of the Dominican Republic. He looked relaxed. Comfortable. He was laughing with 2 local officials, drinking expensive liquor and bragging on the phone, saying he'd dodged a bullet, and that, "Those people back home can rot for all I care." But what Greg didn't know was that Rafael had hacked the security cameras. And he wasn't just watching, he was listening. Rafael tracked Greg's private driver, bribed a hotel worker, found the exact bank Greg was using to stash his offshore accounts. Piece by piece, Rafael built a case. And when he had enough, he handed it over to Interpol. Within 48 hours, a red notice was issued. Greg Thompson was now an internationally wanted fugitive. The media erupted. "Business tycoon turned fugitive," one headline read. "American exec caught in racism scandal now wanted by Interpol." Jordan stood in front of his store, watching the news on a reporter's phone. He thought he was untouchable, he said. But no one's above justice. Malik, now finishing his first semester of nursing school, watched quietly. "I never wanted all this," he said. "But maybe it had to happen. Maybe someone had to stand up." The next week, Rafael sent another message. "It's happening." At dawn, a coordinated task force raided the estate. They found Greg trying to board a private boat, documents in hand, cash in a duffel bag. He didn't go quietly, but he went. In handcuffs. Cameras caught it all. The smirk was gone. The arrogance vanished. What remained was a man exposed. His crimes, his cruelty, his cowardice laid bare for the world to see. Greg was extradited back to the U.S. within the month. Upon landing, he was immediately arrested by federal agents on charges of fraud, wire tampering, obstruction of justice, and interstate evasion. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. During the investigation, Rafael discovered Greg's offshore company had been involved in a dozen shady real estate acquisitions, targeting Black and Latino neighborhoods, pushing out families and inflating prices for profit. Class action lawsuits started pouring in. Civil rights groups joined forces. A congressional investigation was launched. It was no longer just about one racist comment. It was about decades of exploitation. Decades of using power to harm, silence, and steal. And now the bill had come due. Malik was invited to testify before Congress. Nervous but resolute, he spoke plainly. "I just wanted to work hard and help people," he said. "But that man tried to destroy me over nothing. I'm standing here today not because I'm special, but because enough was enough. People like Greg think they can buy their way out of everything. This time he couldn't." The room gave him a standing ovation. Even hardened senators wiped away tears. Jordan expanded his store, turned it into a community hub with free literacy programs, entrepreneurship workshops, and a scholarship fund in Malik's name. Danielle signed a book deal and donated part of her advance to support whistleblowers like Cynthia and Terrence. Cynthia, now safely out of Greg's shadow, started a nonprofit to help women escape toxic work environments. Terrence became a full-time civil rights advocate. And Greg? He sat in a courtroom, pale and trembling, as the jury returned a unanimous verdict. Guilty. Sentenced to 22 years in federal prison, stripped of his assets, disgraced, and abandoned by the very elite circles he once used to destroy others. But the most powerful moment came during sentencing. The judge looked him in the eye and said, "You once told a young man he didn't belong, that he should know his place. Well, this is your place now, Mr. Thompson. And I hope you sit in it for a long, long time." Greg didn't speak. He couldn't. His empire had crumbled. His name a warning. His downfall complete. Outside the courthouse, Malik, Jordan, and Danielle stood side by side, cameras flashing. "What do you want people to take away from this?" a reporter asked. Malik smiled. "That your skin color is not a weakness. That dignity beats hate. And that the truth, no matter how long it takes, always wins."